It began as an ordinary evening shift, with a list of deliveries that needed to be completed before I could call it a night. The last address on my list, however, was unfamiliar, a location I hadn't ventured to before, nestled on the outskirts of an already isolated community. The GPS struggled to locate it, flickering between routes before finally settling on a path that led me deeper into the woods than I had ever been. As the canopy of trees thickened, the last rays of sunlight retreated, and an unnerving chill settled in the air. The road narrowed, and civilization seemed to fall away, leaving behind only the dense forest and an unshakable feeling of being watched. I told myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind, but the discomfort in my gut told a different story. Finally, after what felt like hours, I arrived at the address. The house stood alone. It was an old, beat-up-looking house. Its windows were dark, the garden overgrown, and an eerie silence enveloped the area. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The package in my hand suddenly feeling like a lead weight. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I had to deliver the package. I approached the front door, my steps cautious, the sound of my own breathing unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence. I knocked, expecting no answer, and was not disappointed. Just as I was about to leave the package by the door and escape this unsettling place, I heard someone call my name. I nearly screamed. Then as I was about to leave, I heard it again. Panic surged through me, my heart racing as I scanned the forest, but there was no one to be seen. The rational part of my brain urged me to drop the package and run, but I was rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity holding me captive. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, now accompanied by a faint melodic humming that seemed to emanate from the house itself. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. I stumbled backward, my voice caught in my throat, unable to scream. In a moment of sheer terror, I turned and fled, the package forgotten, my only thought to escape the nightmare that had become all too real. The woods seemed to close in around me as I ran, branches scratching at my face, roots threatening to trip me at every step. I could hear someone behind me. Its footsteps were quiet, but its presence looming ever closer. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, the lights of my van appeared through the trees, a beacon of hope in the darkness. With the last of my strength, I burst through the tree line, threw myself into the van, and slammed the door shut. I didn't dare look back as I started the engine and sped away, leaving the house and whatever was behind me. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I made my way back to home, my mind reeling from the encounter. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my story, it was met with skepticism. The address, I was told, didn't exist, and no one had heard of the house in the woods. It was a chilly Saturday night, and I was out on my first shift as a food delivery driver. As a struggling college student, this part-time job seemed like the perfect way to make some extra cash. Little did I know, it would turn into the scariest experience of my life. I had just finished delivering an order to a house on the outskirts of town. It was a secluded area with barely any streetlights, making it difficult to navigate through the winding roads. As I was about to turn back onto the main road, my phone rang. It was my boss, informing me that there was one last delivery for the night. Reluctantly, I accepted the order and entered the address into my GPS. The destination was listed as a remote cabin deep in the woods. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, but I brushed it off as my imagination getting the best of me. As I drove deeper into the dark forest, my phone signal began to weaken until it eventually disappeared completely. The only light guiding my way was from my headlights and the occasional flicker of my GPS screen. After what felt like hours, I finally arrived at the cabin. It was old and run down, with broken windows and a rusty front door. I couldn't help but wonder who would order food to such an isolated location. I cautiously approached the porch and knocked on the door. There was no answer, so I knocked again, this time louder. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from inside the cabin, followed by muffled screams. My heart began to race as I debated whether to call the police and run or check on the source of the noise myself. My curiosity got the best of me, and I slowly opened the door. Inside, I found a man. He seemed blacked out drunk. Noticing the scattered empty bottles, I realized that he must have been drinking alone and had probably fallen. I let out a sigh of relief, grateful that it was not an emergency. However, as I turned to leave, the man suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me towards him. His grip was tight, and his eyes were bloodshot as he mumbled incoherently. I quickly realized that he was not just drunk, but also high on drugs. Panic set in as I struggled to break free from his grasp. He wouldn't let me go. I was worried what he was going to do. I desperately searched the room for something to defend myself with, and my gaze fell upon a broken bottle on the floor. In one swift motion, I grabbed the bottle and smashed it against the wall, causing the man to release me. Without looking back, I ran out of the cabin and didn't stop until I reached my car. Shaken and terrified, I drove away as fast as I could, grateful to have escaped unharmed. I'd been delivering food for about a year, cruising the dimly lit streets of our sleepy town, podcasts playing in the background, occasionally the soft ding of a new order. But that night, the air felt heavier, like a storm was holding its breath. My phone lit up with the next delivery address, an old part of town where streetlights were more of a suggestion than actual light sources. Just one last delivery, I told myself as I headed toward the dilapidated house at the end of the lane, where even the moonlight seemed hesitant to touch. As I walked up to the front door with the meal in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The door was slightly ajar, creaking and groaning as if inviting me inside. My heart raced as I cautiously pushed it open, my eyes straining to make out anything in the darkness beyond. And then I saw her, a woman sitting in the corner of the living room, her back turned to me. I called out, but she didn't move. As I approached her, a musty smell hit my nostrils, and I realized that it wasn't just the darkness that was unsettling. A surge of adrenaline hit me as the truth settled in. Something was terribly wrong. I reached for my phone, the screen's glow an unwelcome beacon in the suffocating dark. "Emergency services. What's your emergency?" A voice crackled from the speaker. "There's a woman, unresponsive. Please send help," I stammered, unable to peel my eyes away from the figure in the shadow. By the time the ambulance and police arrived, the early morning sun was creeping into the sky, casting light on the scene that had unfolded. The woman, it turned out, was the elderly resident of the house, who suffers from severe dementia. She'd wandered from her bed and forgotten how to return, her condition leaving her confused and silent in the corner. The very house, with its creaky doors and musty scent, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief as she was tended to, safe once more. And with dawn breaking, the nightmare of the night ebbed away, revealing the reality. A small town coming together in a moment of crisis, a reminder of our shared humanity, even in the most unsettling of hours.